Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. This is the channel where we sit down with the men who went, the ones who packed up a life somewhere cold and expensive and came out here looking for something better. And we let them tell you exactly how it went. Not the brochure version, the real one. Tonight's story is a little different from most of what we do here, and I want you to hear me on that before we start. This is not a story about a woman in a bar. It's not a story about a dating site, or a scammer, or a man who lost his head over somebody half his age. If that's what you came for, stick around anyway, because I think this one's going to stick with you longer than any of those. His name is Murray Kowalchuk, 63 years old, 38 years, working oil rigs in northern Alberta, Canada. A big, quiet, careful man who spent his whole working life not making mistakes, because on a drill floor, a mistake takes your hand off. He came to Dumaguete with a plan, a pension, and a notebook where he wrote down every single peso he spent. He was careful. He was so careful. And I'm not going to tell you what happened, because I want you to hear it from him. Here's his story, in his own words. The first thing you should know about me is that I've never been an interesting man. Never wanted to be. My whole life, the highest compliment I ever got was from a tool push at Rainbow Lake who told a company man, "Kowalchuk, don't screw around." That was it. That was my personality. 38 years, and that's the review. Roughneck at 24. Motor hand, derrick hand, driller. Peace country mostly. Then the Deep Basin, then 2 winters up at Rainbow Lake, where it got so cold the block would freeze if you looked at it wrong. You'd chip ice off the stairs with a hammer at 5 in the morning, and your beard would freeze to your collar, and some kid from Newfoundland would be crying in the truck because he'd never felt anything like it. -48 one night. I remember because the thermometer on the doghouse only went to -40. And it was well past the end of it. I was a careful man. I want that in there because it matters later. I checked my rigging twice. Every time. Not because I was scared, because that's the job. You look at the slips, you look at the tongs, you look at the man beside you, and you make sure he's awake. I never had a serious incident on my floor. 38 years. Guys lost fingers. Guys got their bell rung. One fella at a lease near Fox Creek went home in pieces. Not on my floor. Not once. So when people hear what happened to me later, they think, oh, he must be one of those. Soft in the head. Lonely old guy. Doesn't know how the world works. Yeah, well, I knew how the world worked. That's what makes it worse. Here's what happened. I'll try to say it straight. Fella named Gil, driller like me. Knew him since '87. We'd worked the same leases, drank in the same rooms. He came to my wedding, and I went to his second one. Gil got out after the 2015 crash. A lot of guys did. The patch went sideways, and there was nothing for 2 years. And he came back around 2018 saying he was into private lending now. Mortgage fund. Alberta stuff, he said. Construction loans, guys who couldn't get a bank because banks are cowards, 11%. Now I want you to understand something. I wasn't greedy. I have never in my life been greedy. I drove the same truck for 14 years, but I was 56, and my knees were done, and I could see the end of the road, and I had my RRSP, and I had a buyout from my last outfit when they folded the service division. And it was sitting in a bank account earning about as much as a rock earns. And Gil looked me in the face and said, "Murray, I wouldn't put you in something I'm not in myself." So I rolled it in, all of it, and it paid. That's the part nobody tells you about. It paid beautifully for 2 years, every quarter, right on time. And I'd look at the statement and feel like a man who'd finally done something smart. Then, 1 quarter, it didn't come. I called him. Went straight to that recording, the one with the woman's voice, the number you have dialed, is not in service. I hung up, called again. Same thing, called again. I checked it 3 times, like the number was going to change. The letter from the Alberta Securities Commission came about 7 weeks later. There were words in there I had to look up. Class action after that, and lawyers, and 4 years of mail I didn't want to open. And at the end of all of it, they sent me back 16 cents on the dollar. 16 cents. And you know what? It isn't the money. I mean, it is. Obviously it is. I'll be dealing with the money until they put me in the ground. But that's not the thing that sits on my chest at 3 in the morning. The thing is, I checked my rigging twice. Every time. For 38 years. And then a man I knew said trust me, and I didn't check anything at all. I never told my kids. Still haven't, not properly. My daughter's in Edmonton. She's got 2 little ones. She doesn't need to know her old man's an idiot. My son and I don't talk much, which is a whole other story and not one worth telling. So I just carried it around by myself, the way you do. That's a very Alberta thing, I think. You don't say it out loud. You get in the truck and you drive to the job and you don't say it out loud. So, the arithmetic of my life, as of the spring of 2024. CPP and a partial company pension, about $2,400 a month Canadian. $26,000 in a savings account at ATB, which is what was left after everything. A rented place in Grande Prairie for $1,100 a month. $1,100 for a basement suite with a window that didn't open. That's half my money gone before I'd eaten anything or put gas in anything or bought a Christmas present for anybody. I sold the truck. That hurt more than it should have. I kept the tools, never sold the tools. Guy I know said, "Murray, what are you keeping those for?" And I didn't have an answer. And I sat in that basement suite in February with the furnace clicking and a bowl of soup on my knee. And I did the math, the way I do. I do it constantly. I convert everything. I total everything. I know to the dollar what's in the account without looking. It's the only skill I've got left. And the math said, you cannot afford to be old in this country. Not on this, not here, not with rent going up every year, and the pension not moving, and $26,000 sitting there like the last few feet of rope. So one night, and I mean one specific night, about 2 in the morning, because I don't sleep anymore, haven't slept properly since the letters started. I was on YouTube. And that's where it starts, really. Some fella in a rattan chair. That's how it starts. 2 in the morning, February, furnace clicking, and the algorithm serves me up a video with a thumbnail of a beach and yellow letters on it. Living on $200 a month in the Philippines. Something like that. I wasn't looking for it. I was watching a guy rebuild a Detroit diesel, if you want the truth. And then it just came up next. And there he is, 60-something, sunburnt, shorts, in one of those wicker chairs on a balcony with the ocean behind him. And he's going through it. Rent, $400. Electric, $60. Food, $200. Girl who comes and cleans, $40. He's got it on a little whiteboard. Now here's the thing I want you to understand about me, because everybody assumes wrong. I did not feel hope. I've never been a hopeful man. That's not one of my features. What I felt was relief. That's different. It's the feeling you get when the numbers add up. When you've been staring at a column that doesn't work, and then somebody shows you one that does. I paused it. I got a pen. There was a Tim Hortons napkin on the counter. I'd had a double-double and a honey cruller the day before. Don't judge me. And I wrote it all out on the back of it. $2,400 a month coming in. Call it $1,200 to live on down there. And I padded it. I made it 14 because I don't trust other people's numbers anymore. That leaves $1,000 a month. $1,000 a month I'm not spending. which means the 26,000 in the ATB account doesn't shrink. It grows. I sat there in a basement suite in Grande Prairie with frost on the inside of the window, doing arithmetic on a napkin. And the arithmetic said, "You can be a man again. You can stop watching the number go down." I still have that napkin. It's in the front of the notebook. I'll get to the notebook. Why the Philippines? People always want to know that, and they always want the answer to be a woman. And it wasn't. It genuinely wasn't. I know how that sounds coming from a 63-year-old divorced guy, but I'd been done with all that for a long time. My marriage ended in 2009, and it ended quietly, and it was mostly my fault for being gone 3 weeks out of 4 for 30 years. So, no. The reason was this. They speak English. That's the first thing. I'm not learning a language at 63. I can barely operate my own. Thailand, everybody goes to Thailand, but Thailand's got its own alphabet, and I've heard the stories, and I'd already decided I was too smart for the stories. That's a funny thing to say out loud now. I'd decided I was too smart for it. And it's Catholic. My mother was Catholic. Ukrainian side, actually. Ukrainian Catholic. Church out by Sexsmith with the onion domes. And I'm not a religious man, but there's something in me that settles down around church bells. Sounds stupid. It's true, though. And Dumaguete specifically because the fella in the chair was in Dumaguete, and because I looked it up and it wasn't Manila. University town. Small. A boulevard along the water. Not a party place. Not a bar place. Quiet. That was the whole plan. Go somewhere cheap. Be careful. Don't trust anybody. Don't buy anything. Don't sign anything. Watch the number. Careful. I was going to be careful, and careful would be enough. Took me 4 months to get out of there. Sold the truck. A 2011 F-250 with 340,000 on it went for $6,000. And I was in the parking lot afterward for a good 10 minutes not doing anything. The tools I put in my daughter's garage in Edmonton. She asked what I was keeping them for. Same question everybody asks. I said, well. And that was the end of that conversation, which is how most of my conversations end. Told her I was going for an adventure. That's the word I used. Adventure. 63 years old. And I'd never been anywhere except Mexico once, and Fort McMurray 1,000 times. And now I was going on an adventure. I didn't tell her the real reason. That's on me. That's the second lie, if you're counting. And the first one was to myself. Flew Edmonton to Vancouver, to Manila, to Dumaguete. Something like 30 hours all in. And I want to tell you about walking out of that little airport in Dumaguete, because I've thought about it a lot since. It's like standing beside a running engine. That's the only way I can put it. On the rigs, you know how when you walk past the genset, and there's that wall of heat coming off it, and you feel it on your face and your arms all at once? That, except it's the whole sky. 9:30 at night, and it's 30 degrees, and the air is wet, and it smells like diesel, and smoke, and something frying, and something green underneath it all. Flowers or rot, I could never decide. Both, probably. And there's 40 tricycles out front, and every driver's saying, "Sir, sir, sir." And I'm standing there in a Carhartt jacket. I'd flown out of Edmonton in a Carhartt jacket. In June. The place I rented was on the second floor of a house off Hibbert Avenue, 10 minutes from the boulevard. 18,000 pesos a month. That's about 430 Canadian. 2 rooms, a bathroom with a bucket in it, and a balcony with a view of another house's roof, and a mango tree, and about 200 wires, all going different directions. Roosters at 4 in the morning. Not one rooster. An orchestra of roosters taking turns all night. And I'm here to tell you that rooster does not wait for dawn. That is a lie they tell children. Karaoke from somewhere every single night. Somebody's uncle murdering My Way at 11:30 on a Tuesday. Basketball court at the end of the lane and boys on it until midnight. This constant thump, thump, thump. And I loved it. I want to be honest about that part. Those first weeks, I was as close to happy as I'd been in about 8 years. I'd get up at 5 because of the roosters, and walk down to the boulevard while it was still gray, and the fishing bancas would be coming in, and I'd get a coffee for 30 pesos, less than $1, and just sit there. Nobody knew me. Nobody knew about Gil. I started the notebook on day 1. Hilroy, 3 subject, bought it at the National Bookstore in Robinson's for about 60 pesos. Block capitals, same as I wrote my drilling reports for 30 years, because that's the only handwriting I've got. Date, item, pesos, and then the conversion in the far column, and I'd total it every Sunday night. Week 1, everything came in under. Groceries at Lee Plaza, a fan, a rice cooker, a mattress that wasn't horrible. I was running at maybe 22,000 pesos a month all in. 530 Canadian. Under budget. I remember doing that first Sunday total and having to put the pen down for a second. The place 2 doors down was a carinderia. Little open front place, 4 plastic tables, the trays of food behind glass. Adobo, sinigang, some kind of fish, rice in a big steel pot. Run by a woman named Maravich, 44. Widow. She was the landlord's cousin. That's how it works there. Everybody's somebody's cousin. Second week she sent a kid over with a plate. Rice and adobo, still hot, covered with another plate on top. I went down with 100 pesos and tried to pay her. She wouldn't take it. Looked at me like I'd said something rude, said, "You're too thin, Kuya." And I laughed, because I'm 230 pounds. That's the first entry that isn't in the notebook. There's no line for it, nothing to write down. 8 months. That's how long she went without asking me for anything. I want to sit on that a while, because it's the whole story, really. Everything else is just what happened after. The carinderia was called Maravix, which took no great imagination, and it was 4 plastic tables and a glass case with the trays behind it. Adobo, the sinigang if it was a Tuesday. Some fried fish with the eyes still in. A steel pot of rice the size of a wash bucket. 60 pesos a plate. 60 pesos. That's $1.45 Canadian for a meal that would put a man on the floor. And I ate there most days because it was 2 doors down, and because I'd made a rule for myself. No restaurants for tourists, no imported cheese, no nonsense. Careful. I was being careful. She was 44. Husband died in 2019, some kind of heart thing. He'd been a driver. She was up at 4 every morning and she was still there at 9 at night, with a fan pointed at her face and her hair stuck to her forehead. She had a nephew who did his homework at the corner table on a rice sack, because the light was better than at home. There was always somebody's kid in there. There was always somebody's mother. She called me Kuya, which I looked up, and it means older brother. Sort of. It's a respect thing. They use it for anybody older than them that they like. She never asked me for money. Not once, in 8 months. Not a hint, not a hard luck story, not a cousin with a sick baby. None of it. And I know what you're thinking, because I'd have thought it too. That's the long con, Murray. That's how they do it. They wait you out. Yeah, well, let me tell you what I actually thought at the time, which is more embarrassing. I thought, I've found the exception. Because I'd read everything before I came. I'd been on the forums. I'd watched the videos, the angry ones, the guys with the beer bellies and the neck tattoos filming themselves in condos, going on about how they all want your money. And I'd taken it in, and I'd built my whole defense around it. I was going to be the guy who never sent anything to anybody. Guard up. Rigging checked. And I built the check into the notebook. That was the beautiful part. Hilroy, 3 subject, 60 pesos from National Bookstore. Date, item, pesos, conversion. Block capitals. Totaled every Sunday night with a glass of Tanduay, and the roosters already starting up early like idiots. And I'd made a column for her. Not with her name on it. I'm not that far gone. But in my head, there was a column for the money going to Maravich, or to any Filipino, and I checked it every Sunday like a man checking a pressure gauge, and it read 0, 0, week after week, month after month. And I want you to understand what that does to you, because it isn't that I stopped being careful. It's that being careful started telling me the wrong thing. The gauge read 0, so the system was fine. The gauge read 0, so I could relax. That's the trap, and I built it out of my own caution, and I sat down in it myself. Meanwhile, the money was moving all over the place. Not to me, through her. That's the part one could see, and didn't understand. Some woman would come in, and Maravich would hand her a folded 500, and neither of them would say anything about it. Her sister in Cebu. There was always something going to her sister in Cebu. Her mother lived out past Valencia, and there was a jeepney fare and a bag of things every couple of weeks. The nephew's shoes, somebody's electric bill. It went out of that till like water out of a cracked hose, constant, and she never seemed to weigh it or resent it. It was just what the money was for. I thought that was generosity. I actually admired it. It's not generosity. I mean, it is. But it's not only that. She was the eldest daughter. Her father was alive. Her mother was alive. She had, what was it? 4 brothers and sisters, and about 900 cousins, and every single peso that landed in her hand had somewhere it was already expected to go before it got there. That's not her being nice. That's her position. That's the job she was born into. I didn't see it as a system. I saw it as a personality. There's a difference, and it cost me about $17,000 to learn it. Now, the other thing that happened in those months, and this one's less interesting, but it's the reason for everything, so pay attention. The numbers started moving. Month 1, I was at 22,000 pesos, all in. About 530 Canadian. Under budget, and I was smug about it, I'll admit that. Then July hit, and I found out what June had been hiding, which is that June is not actually hot. I'd been sleeping with a fan and a wet t-shirt, and thinking, this is manageable. I'm a Rainbow Lake man. Heat's just weather. And then it got to be 34 degrees at 11 at night, with 90% humidity, and I lay there on a mattress that was wet, not damp, wet, from me. And at 3 in the morning, I got up and stood in the shower in my shorts. I bought an aircon, second-hand from a guy on Facebook Marketplace, $9,500. Call it $230. Fine. One time. Except an aircon runs on electricity, and electricity in Negros costs more than it does in Alberta. That's not a joke. My power bill went from $1,400 a month to $4,800, from $34 to $115. And then the brownouts. Nobody in that YouTube video mentioned the brownouts. 3, 4 hours at a stretch, twice a week, sometimes more when there was weather. Everything in the fridge going over. No fan, no aircon, no water pump, which is the one nobody tells you about, because the water in the tank on the roof only gets up there with a pump. So no power means no shower, no toilet flush, nothing. So I bought a generator. Little Chinese thing, $18,000, $430, plus fuel, plus oil, plus the extension cords, plus the shelf I had to build for it, because you can't leave it on the ground in that rain. And I sat down that Sunday, and I ran the total, and it came out to 26,000 pesos. 625 Canadian. Not 1,200 a month. Not 14. It was fine. It was still under. I still had a cushion. But the direction was wrong. The fella in the rattan chair had given me a number, and the number was a lie. Not a malicious lie. He probably believed it. He probably had a wife who paid the power bill, and he never looked at it. I remember writing 26,000 in that book and looking at it and thinking, correct the budget and move on. That's all I did. I corrected the budget and moved on. I want to say one more thing about that period, and then I'll get to the visa business. There was a day I went down to the Carinderia with a sack of rice. 25 kilos from the market cost me about 1,600. And I put it on the counter, and I said something like, "For all the food, we're square now." And she stopped, and she looked at that sack of rice, and then at me, and something went across her face that I did not understand at all. She said, "Kuya, why are you doing this?" Not angry, hurt, genuinely hurt, and trying to hide it, and doing a bad job of it. She took the rice, because you don't refuse a thing in front of people. But she was cool with me for about a week after, and I couldn't figure out why for the life of me. And I'm a man who doesn't ask, so I didn't ask. I think about that a lot now. I'd tried to settle up. That's what I'd done. I'd tried to close the account and walk away clean. And to her, that was the insult. Because you don't square a debt like that. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to carry it. That's a thing they've got a name for over there. I learned the name later, in a hospital, which is where I learn everything, apparently. The visa thing crept up on me, the way the electric bill did. Tourist visa gets you 30 days on arrival. Then you go to the Bureau of Immigration office. Theirs is in a building on the way to Sibulan, and you sit on a plastic chair under a ceiling fan that does absolutely nothing, while a lady with a stamp works through a stack of papers at her own pace, which is her right, and you wait, and the fan turns, and somebody's baby is crying, and you wait. First extension is 29 days. Then you can do a longer one. There's an ACR card you have to get after a while. That's a few thousand pesos on its own. There's an express lane fee that isn't express. There's a fee for the extension, and a fee for processing the extension, and a fee, as far as I could work out, for the existence of the fee. Call it 3,500 to P4,000 every time. And it comes around again before you've stopped sweating from the last one. That's $85, $90, plus the tricycle, plus the half-day gone. And you can keep doing that. Up to 3 years, then you have to leave the country and come back, which means a flight to Kuala Lumpur or somewhere, and a hotel, and there goes another $600. So it's a treadmill. That's the word for it. You're running, and you're paying, and you're not getting anywhere, and you'll be doing it until you die. Every expat I met told me the same thing. Get the SRRV. I met them at a place on the boulevard. I'm not naming it, they don't need the business, where the foreigners sit in the afternoon with San Miguel light going warm in front of them. Canadians, Americans, a Dutch guy who'd been there 20 years. And the SRRV came up every single time, like a hymn. Special Resident Retirees Visa. Philippine Retirement Authority. You put 10,000 US into a designated bank as a deposit, and in exchange, you get permanent residency, multiple entry, no more extensions, no more plastic chairs, no more lady with the stamp. Done. Forever. 10,000 US. That was, at the time, right around 13,500 Canadian, out of 26. Now here's a fella I'll call Bob, because his name was Bob. American, 70s, been there 12 years, big red face, one of those guys who tells you the way things are. And Bob explains the whole thing to me with the confidence of a man who's never once been wrong in his own opinion. It's a deposit, Murray. It's not a fee. It's your money. It sits there. You get it back if you leave. And you can convert it, he says, after a while. Put it into a condo. Put it into a long-term lease. That's what he did. And I said, so it's not sitting there. And he said, well, I want to be fair to Bob. He wasn't lying to me. He believed every word. But I've met that man before. I've met him in a Boston Pizza in Grande Prairie with an 11% return and a handshake. So I did what I do. I went home and I read. And that's when I started finding the other stuff. The forum threads. Guys who'd put the deposit in through an agent and the agent had taken a cut nobody mentioned. Guys who'd tried to withdraw and found the process took months. Guys who'd converted it into a condo, and then the condo turned out to have a problem with the title, which, and this is the thing that stopped me cold, is a normal thing over there. Foreigners can't own land. You can own a condo unit, but only if the building's under 40% foreign, and how the hell do you check that? And who tells you if it changes? I didn't understand any of it. That's the honest truth. I read for 3 weeks, and I still didn't understand it. And I've read blowout prevention manuals. I can read a technical document. But I went to the bank anyway. I want to be very clear about this, because it's the part 1,000 least proud of, and also the only thing that saved me. I went to the BDO branch on Purtice's Street with my passport and my bank details and the account information Bob's agent had given me on a piece of paper with a phone number written on it in ballpoint. And I sat down at the desk with a young woman in a uniform, and she started filling out the form. And I got as far as she turned the paper around and put her finger where I was supposed to sign. And my hand stopped. I didn't decide anything. I want you to understand that. There was no moment of clarity, no voice in my head. My hand just wouldn't do it. Same as when you reach for a chain and something in your arm says, no, this is going to take your fingers, before your brain's caught up at all. Because it was the same shape. That's what it was. It was the same exact shape as Gil, a man I barely knew, telling me it was safe, telling me it was my money. It just sits there, a piece of paper with a number on it, and $13,500 leaving my account and going somewhere I could not see. I said I'd left something at the house. That's what I told her. I said, sorry, I've left a document. I'll come back tomorrow. And I went outside and stood on Purtice's Street in about 35 degrees with the tricycles going by and my shirt wet through, and I felt sick, and I did not go back. Never did it. Never got the SRRV. Kept doing the extensions. Kept sitting in the plastic chair. Cost me maybe 40,000 pesos over the whole time, about 1,000 Canadian, all in, annoying, but it stayed in my pocket, and it stayed liquid, and I could get on a plane any day I wanted. That decision is the only reason I'm sitting here talking to you, instead of still down there. But I'll tell you the cruel part, because there's always a cruel part. Not spending that 10 grand is what let me stay. If I'd wired it, I'd have been broke by month 10. Genuinely broke. And I'd have had to go home in the fall of 2024 with my tail between my legs, and nothing worse would have happened to me. Instead, I had a cushion, and the cushion meant I could stay, and staying is what cost me. Anyway, while all that was going on, something else was happening that I wasn't tracking at all. Because it wasn't money. I'd started fixing things. Started with the extractor fan in the Carinderia, which was clogged with about 9 years of adobo grease and running like a man with one lung. Took me an afternoon. Then it was the gas line to the burner, which was a length of rubber hose with a hose clamp on it, and I'd been eating 20 feet from that thing for 6 months without looking at it properly, and when I did look at it properly, I nearly had a heart attack. Replaced the whole run. Cost me pow 200 for the parts, about $53. Then the chest freezer, which was ancient and Japanese, and had a relay in it that anybody could have fixed if they'd had a meter. And listen, I hadn't used my hands in 4 years. I want to say that plain. 4 years of not being any use to anybody. Sitting in a basement suite, waiting for a letter from a lawyer. And now I'm on my back on a concrete floor in Negros with a wrench, and there's a woman standing over me going, "Kuya, it's too hot. Come out. Drink water." And there's a kid handing me tools. And I'm somebody again. That's the drug. That's what it was. They stopped calling me Kuya somewhere in there and started calling me Tito. Uncle. That's what Tito means. It's what you call family. I noticed, and I liked it. And I did not think about it for one single second past liking it. Then there was a baptism. Maravich's youngest sister's boy. And I got asked to be a godfather. Ninong, they call it. And there were about 11 other Ninongs, so I figured it was ceremonial. It's a big Catholic thing. Everybody gets to be a godfather. Why not? I said yes because it seemed rude to say no. That's the whole reason. It seemed rude to say no. I stood in the Cathedral of St. Catherine in a borrowed barong with sweat running down my back and a candle in my hand, and I did not know what I was agreeing to. And there's nothing in the notebook for that day either. Well, that's not true. There's a line. Barong, $100. Gift, P1000. $67. That's what it says. That's all it says. The pain started on a Thursday night in February, and I thought it was the fish. That's what I told myself. Bad fish. I'd had the fried galunggong at lunch, and I lay there on the mattress with the aircon going, and this thing under my right ribs like somebody had a hand in there and was closing it. Slowly, and then opening it, and then closing it again. I've had things happen to me. I broke my collarbone on a rig at Fox Creek and drove myself to White Court. I've had a tong swing back and put me on my knees, so I know what I do. I lie still, and I wait for it to stop. It didn't stop. Friday, I couldn't stand up straight. Saturday, I was gray and sweating cold on top of the normal sweating, and I threw up twice, and I couldn't take a proper breath, because the breath was where the pain lived. Maravich came up the stairs Saturday afternoon. She'd been sending the nephew up with food, and the food was coming back untouched, and she'd worked it out. She took one look at me. One look. And I said something like, "It's nothing. It's the fish. I just need to sleep." And she said, "Tito, get up." Not a suggestion. I have never in my life heard a woman say 2 words like that. 38 years of tool pushes, and I got told off harder by a 5-foot Carinderia owner in a house dress. She got a tricycle. I'm 230 pounds folded into a sidecar built for a small Filipino, and I'm hanging out the side of it, and every bump on Hibbard Avenue is a knife. And she's in there with me holding my arm, and the driver's going as fast as he can go, which isn't fast. Silliman Medical Center. That's the good hospital. That's the one everybody says go there, not the provincial one. And here's where the story gets to the actual point of it. Here's the harsh truth, if you want the harsh truth, and it's got nothing to do with a woman, or a scam, or anything you clicked on this to hear. They don't treat you until you pay. I want to say that again because Canadians especially do not understand it. I'm from a country where you break your leg and you show a card. I stood in that emergency department bent over a chair, and a very polite young man behind glass asked me for a deposit before anybody looked at me. 30,000 pesos to start, 720 Canadian, just to be admitted. And I paid it. Of course I paid it. I could barely see. Acute cholecystitis. Gallbladder full of stones, and the thing had gone bad. They said it had to come out, and it had to come out now, and they said it kindly. And then they gave me a piece of paper with an estimate on it. 250,000 pesos. Roughly. 6,000 Canadian. Roughly. Now, I want to talk about the insurance, because this is the part where you get to call me an idiot, and you'd be right, and I'd rather you heard it from me. I looked into it before I came. I did. I'm not a man who doesn't look into things. I'm a man who looks into things and then does the wrong thing anyway, which is worse. And what I found was, at 63, expat health cover was going to run me somewhere between 500 and 600 Canadian a month. 600 a month? Out of 2,400. And they'd flagged a murmur from a physical I had in 2019. Nothing, the doctor said. Half the men my age have got one. And that meant exclusions, and it meant a higher band, and it meant a bunch of language I couldn't follow. So I sat down with the notebook, and I ran the arithmetic. 600 a month is 7,200 a year. And I thought, I'm healthy. I've never been in a hospital. My father worked till he was 71. I'll self-insure. I'll keep the 26,000 liquid, and if something happens, I'll pay for it out of that. That's a real decision that a rational man makes, and it is also, I now understand, a coin flip you only have to lose once. Because here's what nobody tells you. Insurance isn't for when you get sick. It's for when you get sick and you still have to live afterwards. 4 days in Silliman. Surgery. 2 nights in the ward. The antibiotics. The anesthetist billed separate. The surgeon billed separate. The room. The meds from the pharmacy that they bring you the receipt for, while you're still on the drip. Final bill came to 310,000. 7,400 Canadian. I paid it in 3 transfers, standing at a counter in the lobby with a plastic bracelet still on my wrist. And I want to tell you what it feels like to watch that number go. It's not panic. It's quieter, and it's worse than panic. It's the feeling of a thing you built with your hands coming apart while you stand there. 26,000 had been about 23 by then, after the flights and the setup, and 14 months of running a bit over budget. Now it was 15 and change. $15,000. That's what I had left in the world. 63 years old. But that's not the thing. That's the money, and the money's just the money. Here's the thing. She never left. Maravich closed the Carinderia. Closed it. 4 days, no income. And her sister came in from Valencia to mind the nephews, and she sat in that hospital in a plastic chair from Saturday to Wednesday. She slept in it. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning with the drip clicking and the aircon roaring, and there'd be a woman asleep sitting up in a chair with her sandals off and her feet tucked under her. She dealt with the nurses. She dealt with the paperwork, all of it, the forms and the queue and the pharmacy runs, and she argued a charge down. I watched her do it in Cebuano, very quietly, very politely, and the number came down by about 4,000 pesos, and nobody raised their voice once. I could not have done any of that, not one piece of it. I'd have been eaten alive. She brought me lugao in a Tupperware because hospital food is a punishment. She washed my shirt in the sink. She put a rosary on the little table beside the bed and didn't say anything about it and didn't take it back. And on the 3rd day I was sitting up and I said to her, I'm going to pay you for the days you were closed. And she went very still. And she said, no. And I said, Maravich, you lost 4 days. I know what 4 days costs you. Let me. And she said it again. No. And then she said something I've thought about every day since. She said, "You are not a customer, Tito." That's it. That's all she said. And she went out into the hall to talk to a nurse, and that was the end of it. There's a phrase they've got, utang na loob. I'd seen it on the forums, always in the angry posts, always used as a weapon. They'll utang na loob you. They'll guilt you. Watch out. The rough translation is a debt of gratitude. But that's not it. That's a Canadian translation, and it's wrong. It's not a debt you pay, it's a debt you carry. You carry it, and it binds you to the person, and neither of you ever settles up. Because settling up would mean you were done with each other. And being done with each other is the insult. I understood it then. Lying in a bed in Silliman with a hole in my side, with a woman asleep in a chair who had shut her business down for me. And I understood something else. And this is the part 1/500 like every man watching to hear. It ran the other direction now. For 8 months, I'd been the careful man with the empty column. I owed nobody. That was my whole system. And then 4 days in a hospital, and I owed her something that could not be measured, could not be converted, could not be written down in block capitals in a Hilroy notebook with a dollar figure in the far column. I'd walked into that country determined not to be in debt to anybody, and I came out of that hospital owing a debt I had no way of paying and no intention of refusing. I didn't open the notebook for 11 days. When I did, I ran the total for the year, and I saw that the line I'd been drawing wasn't flat anymore. It had a slope on it. I looked at that slope for about a minute. Then I closed the book. The call came in April. Maravic's father, out past Valencia, 71 years old. Stroke. I was there within the hour because she asked me to come, and I want to be precise about that. She asked me to come. She did not ask me for anything else. The house is a Bahay Kubo, with a concrete front room they'd added on, and a corrugated roof, and about 9 people living in it. Rooster in the yard. Basketball hoop nailed to a mango tree with no net on it. The old man was already at the district hospital in Bayawan by then, and I went, and I saw him. He was in a ward with 6 beds, and the fans turning slow, and the family sitting on the floor, because there's no chairs. Left side gone, mouth pulled down. He was a small brown man who'd been a fisherman and then a carpenter, and he was looking at the ceiling, and there was nothing behind his eyes that I could see. And I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, and I watched the family, and I did the thing I always do, which is I counted. They'd sold the pig. That was the first thing I found out. There'd been a pig they were fattening for the fiesta, and it went the day after the stroke. Then the motorbike, the little Honda the son used for his hobble work. And that's the man's actual income, and it went for P42,000, about 1,000 Canadian. Then the mother's ring. Nobody said any of this to me. I picked it up in pieces, standing in a hallway, from a cousin who was talking to another cousin. And nobody, I want this on the record, nobody asked me for a peso. Not Maravich, not the brother, not the mother, not one of them. In fact, when I came in, they were embarrassed. Embarrassed that the house was small. The mother apologized to me for the food. Nobody had to ask. That's the thing I need you to understand, and I don't know if I can make you. If you've never stood in a room like that with money in your pocket, you don't know what it does. There is no request. There's just the arithmetic sitting there in plain sight. A family that has sold everything it owns, and a great big Canadian standing in the doorway with $15,000 in a bank account, and everybody in that room knowing both of those facts and being far too polite to put them next to each other. I gave P95,000, about 2,300 Canadian. And here's the confession, since this is a confession. It was the best I felt in 4 years. I'm serious. I'd been useless since 2020. A man in a basement suite waiting on lawyers. And I stood in a hospital corridor in Negros Oriental, and I made a problem go away with my hand. And the brother put his forehead on my knuckles. That's a thing they do there, Manopo. It's respect. You do it to elders. And I thought, this is what money's for. This is the first sensible thing I've done with money in my whole life. I meant it too. I'd do it again. That's not the mistake. Keep that in your head. Giving that money is not the mistake. The mistake is what I didn't understand about what happens after. Because the pig was gone, and the motorbike was gone, and that means the son's income was gone, and the old man needed maintenance medication now, forever, and the province gives you some of it, and not the rest, and it's 2,800 a month, and who pays for that? Well, there isn't a villain in this part. One want to be very clear. Nobody sat in that house and plotted. It's just that when a family has one asset, the family uses the asset, and the asset was me. And nobody made a decision about that any more than water makes a decision to go downhill. The nephew, the one who did his homework on the rice sack, he was starting at a school in Dumaguete, and it was $18,000 the semester. $430. Maravich had been putting that away out of the Carinderia for 2 years, and the 2 years went to Bayawan. I paid it. It's $430, and the kid's clever, and what am I? A monster? Then the roof. Storm came through in May, took half the corrugated off the front room, and they're putting rice sacks over the whole. P26,000 with the labor. 625. Then the medication. Then the fare when the brother had to go back and forth. Then the old man died in June, 6 weeks after the stroke, and there's a funeral. And a Filipino funeral is not a Canadian funeral. It's 9 days. 9 days of people coming and being fed. There's a tent, there's chairs rented, there's a coffin, there's the tomb, there's the meal every night for whoever shows up, and whoever shows up is everybody. P70,000, $1,700. And I paid it, and I was glad to. I was, and I stood at the back in a white shirt, with sweat running down me, and a woman I didn't know handed me a cup of coffee and said, "Thank you, Po, Tito Murray." And I nodded, and I could not speak. And then I went home to my room, and I got out the notebook. I hadn't totaled it since the hospital. 11 days had turned into 4 months. That's what happens. That's exactly what happens. And I'm the guy who checks his rigging twice. June the 12th. I remember the date. Karaoke going somewhere down the lane, somebody doing "Take Me Home, Country Roads," which they all love over there, God knows why. And I sat at that plastic table with the fan on my back, and I added the columns properly. 14 months, $17,200 gone. 26 down to 8,900. And I'm not a man who panics. I want you to know I didn't panic. I did what I do. I got a fresh page, and I drew it out. What's left? What goes out a month now that there's medication and school and a family and a slope on the thing? And I ran it forward. 11 months. That's what the page said. 11 months, and the account is empty, and I am 64 years old, with 2 knees that are finished, and a back that's finished, and no work permit. And you're not allowed to work there anyway. And even if you were, who's hiring me? 12,000 kilometers from Alberta. On a tourist visa that has to be renewed every 2 months forever until I die. I looked at that page for a long time. And here's what I want you to understand about that moment, because it's the whole reason I agreed to talk to anybody about this. I wasn't angry. There was nobody to be angry at. That's the horror of it. Nobody lied to me. Nobody stole from me. Nobody ran a con on me. A woman shut her business down and slept in a chair for 4 days for a foreigner she didn't owe a thing to. And a family buried a father. And every single peso I gave went where they said it would go. And I checked, because of course I checked. I'd spent 14 months being careful. I'd never been so careful in my life. And careful had walked me right off the edge of the shelf. I told her a week later, sitting at the corner table, the one with the good light. I said, Maravich, I have to go home. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She didn't ask me for one thing. Not then, not ever, not once in the entire time I knew her. She just went quiet for a minute. And then she said, who will fix the freezer? And that's the one that got me. I sold the generator to a guy down the lane for $9,000, which was less than I paid, but that's what selling is. The aircon I left in the wall. The rice cooker I gave to the nephew. The tools I'd brought. A decent set of metrics. A multimeter. A torque wrench my father gave me in 1979. I left at the Carinderia in a plastic crate under the counter. Because somebody there is going to need to get that freezer open one day, and it might as well be with good tools. I've got a godson in Negros Oriental. Baptized him in the Cathedral of St. Catherine, with a candle in my hand and sweat coming down my back. Ninong Murray. He's 4 now. I send what I can, which isn't much, and I will keep sending it as long as I'm breathing. And I want to be honest with you and say that I cannot really afford it, and I'm going to do it anyway. The last day she made me pantsit. Sat with me at the corner table with the good light. Didn't cry. Neither did I, because I'm from Alberta, and we just get a bit tight in the throat and start talking about the weather. At the airport in Sibulin, she handed me a bag. Dried mangoes and a little bottle of something and a rosary. Pasalubong, they call it. You're supposed to bring gifts when you travel. It's a whole thing over there. And she was giving them to me, to take home, to the country I was running back to. I said something stupid. I said, I'll come back when I've got things sorted. She said, okay, Tito. She knew. She was being polite. That's the thing about that country. Everybody's being polite right up to the end, and the politeness is real, and it's also a door closing. So, Grande Prairie, basement suite off 100 Street, $1,100 a month, window that doesn't open. Same as before, different street. $8,900, which after the flights and the deposit and the first month came to about $7.5. I work at a tool rental place now. 20 hours a week behind the counter, signing out plate compactors and jackhammers to guys who are the age I was when I still had knees. Standing on concrete. My knees are done, and I stand on concrete for 4 hours at a stretch, and then I go home, and I put them up on a pillow, and I don't say anything about it to anybody, because that's what we do. It's $15 over minimum. It keeps me above water. Barely. I told my daughter about Gil. Finally. Sat in her kitchen in Edmonton in October, with her kids running around, and it came out. All of it. The 11%, and the 4 years, and the 16 cents. She wasn't angry about the money. She was angry that I'd carried it alone for 4 years, and never once picked up the phone. She said, Dad, you let us think you were fine. She said, I would have helped you. And I sat there with a cup of coffee going cold, and I couldn't argue with her because she was right, and because I still don't know how to be a man who says a thing like that out loud. That's the actual damage, if you want to know. Not the money, the years of not saying it. Now, people tell me I got off light. And I did. I know I did. There's men down there who lost 300 grand, who put a house in somebody's name and lost the house, who are 70 years old and stuck because they haven't got the airfare home. I got out with about a third of what I took. That's a win, technically. On paper. It doesn't feel like a win. It feels like I fell off a roof and landed on a car instead of the pavement. So here's what I'd tell you. And I've thought about how to say it. And I'm going to say it the way I'd say it to a young hand on a rig, which is plain and once. Retiring abroad isn't a scam. Nobody scammed me. Get that idea out of your head, because it's the comfortable idea and it'll kill you. Retiring abroad is a budget. That's all it is. It's a column of numbers. And the problem with a budget is that a budget hasn't got a gallbladder in it. That's the whole thing. That's the harsh truth, right there. The fella in the rattan chair gave me a number for a normal month, and every month is normal until it isn't. Rent, food, electric, beer. That's a normal month. Nobody in any of those videos has a line item called one bad year. So don't ask what it costs to live somewhere. That's the wrong question, and it's the question everybody asks. Ask what it costs to have one bad year there, one hospital, one funeral, one roof. And if you can't take that number out of your savings and still have savings, you cannot afford to retire there. You can afford to visit. That's a different thing. Second, insurance. I did the arithmetic, and I decided to self-insure, and it was rational and it was wrong, and the reason it was wrong is that insurance isn't for getting sick. It's for still having a life after you got sick. If you can't afford the premium, you can't afford the country. I'll say that again. If you can't afford the premium, you cannot afford the country. Third, and this is the one nobody wants to hear, you cannot go and live in a place and stay outside of it. That was my whole plan. Live there, spend nothing, owe nothing, be a ghost with a notebook. And it does not exist, that position. There's no such spot. You're either not in the house, in which case you're alone at 63 in a foreign country with roosters and no one to call when your gallbladder goes, or you're in the house. And being in the house costs. It costs, and it costs, and there's no line in the book where it stops costing, because that's not what a family is. In Alberta, a family's a thing you belong to. Over there, it's a thing you hold up. Everybody's holding it up, all of them, all the time, and if you're the one with the most, you hold up the most. That's not a con. That's just physics. Nobody stole from me. I want that said clearly, because there are men in the comments of every one of these videos who are going to want to make Maravich into a villain. And she was the best person I have ever known. The Philippines didn't take my money. Arithmetic did. And here's the last of it. And then I'm done. I'd go back tomorrow. If somebody walked in here right now and handed me 150 grand, I'd be on a plane by Friday. I'd fix that freezer. I'd sit at the corner table. I'd be Tito again instead of a 64-year-old man handing out jackhammers in the snow. I can't. That's all. It's not a moral. It's not a lesson. It's just the arithmetic. And the arithmetic says no. Yeah? Well, can't complain. That's Murray Kowalchuk, 64 now. Grande Prairie, Alberta. And I want to sit with you for a minute on why this one is different. Because I think most of you felt it coming and I want to name it. There's no villain in this story. That's rare. On this channel we tell a lot of stories with villains in them because villains get clicks and because, frankly, villains exist. But the reason this one should frighten you more than the others is that Murray did almost everything right. He didn't fall in love with a photograph. He didn't wire money to a stranger. He didn't buy land he couldn't own or marry into a marriage he couldn't leave. He kept a ledger. He walked out of that bank without signing. And he still nearly went under, because the thing that got him wasn't a woman, and it wasn't a scam. It was a hospital, and a funeral, and a roof, and the ordinary weight of belonging to people. So, take the practical part with you. Health insurance is not optional after 60. If the premium looks impossible, that is your budget telling you the country is impossible. The SRRV deposit is not a fee, but it is not a savings account either. And the money you can't reach in an emergency is money you don't have. Foreigners can't own land, and a cost of living figure from a YouTube video is a figure for a month when nothing goes wrong. And take the human part, too. In the Philippines, love and obligation live in the same room. You do not get to enter one and not the other. That is not a warning about Filipinos. It's a warning about you, and whether you've honestly counted what you can carry. Run your numbers, then run them again with a hospital in them. Thanks for spending this time with us. If Murray's story landed with you, share it with the fella you know who's watching those rattan chair videos at 2 in the morning. We'll see you next time inside the Philippines.